All right, so imagine this. You wake up, right? And you're not just drowning in to-dos. You feel, I don't know, in control, you know?
Hmm.
Your energy's focused. Like, it's focused on what matters. Work, life, the things you actually care about.
That's the allure of essentialism, right?
It is, and that's exactly what we're diving into today.
With Greg McKeown's book.
Essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less. Have you read it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's really about, well, it's not just about doing more. It's about doing the right things.
Doing them better. And you know what? McKeown, he opens with this story about law school.
Oh, yeah.
And he has this realization. He's like, wait a minute. I don't have to be here. Like, he woke up from this trance.
Right.
And you remember, he has the power to choose a different path.
And that's what led him to this whole essentialism thing.
Exactly. And it made me think, how many of us, walk around feeling trapped? In these situations, we don't think we can change. But McKeown, he says we always have a choice. What do you think?
He's totally tapping into learned helplessness. It's like that experiment, the one with the dogs.
Oh, right, yeah.
Where some dogs had control over these shocks and some didn't.
And the ones who didn't, they just kind of...
They gave up, even when they could have gotten out of it.
Wow. Okay, so we need to break free from this learned helplessness then.
Absolutely.
But how do we even figure out what's worth our energy? I mean, where do we start?
Well, you know about the Pareto principle.
Yeah.
It's that 80-20 thing. Like 80% of our results come from just 20% of what we do. So we got to find that 20%.
Find that crucial 20%. It's like, what comes to mind for me is Warren Buffett.
Classic example.
He doesn't invest in everything, right?
Nope. Focuses on a few key opportunities where he sees the biggest potential.
Big, concentrated bets, not a million little ones.
Exactly.
Now, I know we're not all, running Berkshire Hathaway here.
Right.
But the principle, it's the same, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Are we saying yes too much? Spreading ourselves too thin?
It all leads to the next thing. Trade-offs. We say yes to one thing.
We're saying no to something else.
Even if we don't realize it at the time.
Okay, so trade-offs. McKeown, he tells this really interesting story about Southwest Airlines.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
They went all in on those short-haul flights.
Smart.
And they made some big choices based on that. No meals on the flight, no assigned seats.
Things we associate with Southwest now, that's their brand.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it worked. They became crazy successful.
Yeah.
Because they fully committed to their yes.
Yeah.
Which meant
saying no to a lot of other stuff.
big no's. Like, remember what happened with Continental Airlines? They tried to copy that low-cost model.
Yeah, but they weren't willing to give up all the extras.
Totally. They wanted to have their cake and eat it too.
Right.
And that
rarely works out.
never does. It's like in our own lives. We hesitate to make those tough choices, to commit to the yes.
Because it means saying no.
Which, speaking of, brings us to saying no. And McKeown, he uses a really powerful example here, Rosa Parks.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Her saying no on that bus, that was huge. That was essentialism.
Absolutely. And it shows us something. Saying no doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing.
Right.
It can be graceful, compassionate even.
It's about protecting your time and energy.
Right, exactly. McKeown even gives us some lines we can use, like, I'm happy to help with X, but I can only commit to Y right now.
Oh, I like that, setting those boundaries.
But, like, in a nice way.
It's funny, it's like saying no. Well, it's kind of a kindness.
Totally.
Not just to ourselves, but to the other person too.
Mm.
And speaking of kindness to ourselves, McKeown talks about creating space for escape.
Oh, yeah. Permission to disconnect, recharge.
Like, he talks about Bill Gates and his, what are they called?
Think weeks.
Think weeks, right. Where he totally disconnects to reconnect.
Yeah, to see the bigger picture.
Now, I don't know about you, but a whole week off, not exactly in my schedule right now.
Yeah, that level of disconnection isn't always doable, but our brains, they need that downtime
It's a process.
to make those connections, even if it's just short bursts,
Oh, for sure.
For me, it's 20 minutes every morning with a good book.
Really?
Yeah, something about disconnecting from everything, even for a little bit, it helps me center myself.
It's like hitting that reset button.
Exactly.
Getting your mind right for the day. It's
Yeah.
like clearing out all the clutter,
Yes.
making space for what matters. And you know what I love about McKeown? His approach. It's not about these huge, massive changes.
Right, it's not like this overnight thing.
It's the small wins.
The small wins, exactly.
Those tiny victories that they add up over time.
He gives that example of the Richmond Police Department with their positive tickets. Have you heard of this?
No. Tell me about it.
So instead of just, punishing bad behavior, they started giving out these tickets for good stuff.
Like,
Little things, like helping someone cross the street or picking up trash. Just being a good human.
I love that.
Right. It totally changed the whole dynamic.
It's so easy to get caught up, thinking we need to make these huge changes.
To see any progress.
Yeah. But sometimes it's the small, consistent things.
That make the biggest difference. It's like we're building these neural pathways.
One small win at a time.
Until they're like super highways of positive change.
Ooh, I like that. And, those small wins, they become even more powerful, I think, when they're part of a routine.
Oh, absolutely. Routines are essential.
McKeown uses the example of Michael Phelps,
The swimmer.
the Olympic swimmer.
Yeah.
Phelps had this crazy, detailed pre-race routine. Everything was planned out, what he ate, how he stretched, even the music he listened to.
It was about automating the essential.
So his mind was free to focus on what mattered.
Winning.
Exactly. And that's the thing about routines, right? They get this bad rap. People think they're boring.
Yeah.
But it's actually about freedom.
Discipline equals freedom.
Yes. By building routines, like around the stuff that matter.
You free up mental space for other things.
Exactly. It's like our brains, they don't have to constantly be making decisions about that stuff anymore.
Right. Which leaves us more present.
More engaged in what we're doing right now.
McKeown asks this great question. What's important, NW?
Ooh, I like that. Cutting through all that noise, the past, the worries about the future, to be here in this moment.
It makes me think of that sushi chef, Jiro Ono.
From Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Yes, he's a total master. And you can just see it when you watch him work. It's not just skill, it's
Presence.
yes. It's about finding those moments of, like, kairos.
Kairos.
Yeah, those times when you're just totally in the flow, totally immersed in what you're doing.
So how do we get more of those? More Kairos moments?
It takes practice, but it starts with being intentional, creating space for them.
So it's like what we were talking about before with disconnecting.
Exactly. Sometimes we have to step away from the busyness to create space for those moments of clarity, to connect with what's essential.
It's like McKeown says, only once you give yourself permission to stop trying to do it all, to stop saying yes to everyone, can you make your highest contribution towards the things that really matter.
It's about figuring out what those things are and then having the courage to go after them.
It's about designing our lives around what matters, not just letting life happen to us.
Being intentional.
Yes, making those choices about our time or energy.
Moving away from that, reactive state where we're just pulled in a million directions and towards something more intentional.
So we can be more aligned with what we really want.
Exactly.
And that's a journey, isn't it? I mean, it's not like we just suddenly become essentialists.
It's a process.
It's ongoing, right? We're always figuring it out.
Discerning, evaluating, refining.
So where do we even begin?
Well, McKeown, he gives us this great question at the end of the book. He asks, if you could only be truly excellent at one thing.
One thing.
What would it be?
Wow, that's a good one.
It's about cutting through all the noise, getting to the heart of what matters. Like, what's that one thing that if you could just nail it, it would make everything else easier or even unnecessary?
I love that. It's like, what's our unique contribution?
Right. What can you bring to the world that no one else can? And it doesn't have to be something huge, It could be something small, but it's got to resonate with you.
It's got to feel true.
Exactly.
So to wrap things up today, everybody, we've been talking all about the core principles of essentialism.
We talked about choice, about figuring out what's truly vital.
We talked about saying no.
And about making space for what matters.
But maybe most importantly, we talked about finding our one thing, that one thing we can be truly excellent at. So that's our question for you. What will you choose?